And next we are joined by my colleague, Fran Schreiberg from the National Lawyers Guild.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I've been an attorney since 1972, and for close to 30 years have practiced in the field of labor and employment law. I work for the state of California for some nonprofits. I've also been in the private sector. Most recently, I've worked very closely with legal services organizations up and down the state of California who represent low-wage workers who are subjected to wage theft. And for minimum wage, working for tips only, for no overtime, no meal and rest breaks, among other things. California's laws and regulations to protect its most exploited workers have pretty significant limitations. Even though there's a law that requires car wash employers to register and to obtain workers' comp and to post bonds to cover the wages, the enforcement of those laws is extremely difficult. The Labor Commissioner, the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement here in California, provides two avenues for workers to get their wages back. One is to go through a district office filing a complaint, and the other is to have a complaint forwarded or brought by the Bureau, what's called the Bureau of Field Enforcement, which involves a more investigation. Much of the enforcement that the Labor Commissioner does is through these sweeps, and it's a great way to get a lot of penalties, high penalties actually, but it doesn't really focus in on the workers' lost wages. So the sweeps look at paperwork violations, they look at the failure to register and the workers' comp failures, and they tote up the penalties for that. But they don't go into worker interviews, and they don't really look into and audit workers' records, and so they don't determine what the minimum wage is that's owed to those individual workers or the overtime or so forth. As I said, these are significant penalties that they're assessed, and that's important for an enforcement effect, but the individual workers also need justice, and that translates to having restitution for the wages that have been stolen. Even when the Labor Commissioner does address workers' individual wages, it doesn't sufficiently follow through, so often leaving, and we heard from one of the witnesses, Aura Lopez, about her situation, often leaving them with no money in their pockets. So this happens even though a judgment might have even gone to Superior Court. There's still no information that's given to the workers afterwards as to how they can collect their money. The Labor Commissioner has the skills to do these cases, and workers do not. And so the recommendations that I'm going to make, and these are recommendations that are focusing on an issue in terms of what government can do. Obviously, the best approach to this would be to have a union representing these workers that could collectively bargain for their wages and to improve the conditions and to address the problems that we've heard here today. But I'm going to focus just on what I think our government should do, and this would be something that they would do in addition to having a union. And that's number one, to have some coordination. I think we need to have the Bureau of Field Enforcement, which is this more investigative arm, take on and dedicate some attorneys and some investigator staff to do the following. Number one is to coordinate the oversight of all of the cases that actually come into the district office. So an individual worker walks in, but there's coordination through the Bureau of Field Enforcement so that you have some uniformity. Number two, to assure that a judgment is timely secured in Superior Court after the district office issues an order and a decision and an award. Number three is to actually tell the workers how they can collect their money. That there is an insurance bond, and that if there is no bond, if the employer was derelict and didn't get a bond, that there's a fund that is made up of money from these car wash registration fees. They're not even giving that information to the individual workers. They have no idea that this is something that they can avail themselves of. Number four, I think that the Bureau of Field Enforcement has to actually go out and investigate cases. They have to show up on the street ahead of time when the workers have to show up in the morning, and they have to watch. They have to see what happens to those workers They have to see what time those workers then begin to work. They have to then subpoena or do an audit of the employer's records, and to follow through with those audits to get at the employers who are essentially engaging in a shape-up kind of system, to get the proof that they're being denied pay for the time that they have to be there and just wait. Number 5, they need to interview workers in their own language. And again, do the audits that focus not only on the penalties that are going to come back to them, but also to get the workers their stolen wages. And number 6, and this is really important because one of the things that has been addressed is the issue of intimidation. And unless we have some kind of heavy presence in the enforcement area, you're not going to address the intimidation issue. So what we need are joint investigations that go out with EDD to deal with state tax issues, that look at the work with the Department of Insurance on workers' comp fraud, that work with Cal OSHA, and get these cases prepared and forwarded to a district attorney for criminal or civil prosecution under 17200 under the unfair competition laws. That's the only way you're going to get the kind of attention that you need to get to these problems. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify here today.
Thank you very much, Fran.